there's been a relationship between the Chinese and, incredible as it may sound, these reptilian beings.
Tredici morti, diversi feriti gravi, un portale interdimensionale e alcuni scheletri di presunti rettiliani recuperati nelle grotte sotto una chiesa costruita nel 1630 in Messico. E non è una puntata di Stargate. Sembra essere questo il risultato di un'operazione condotta da una squadra di ex militari statunitensi specializzata in logistica, incaricati da un'azienda della difesa americana di intervenire per recuperare gli asset, come li chiamano loro, prima dei cinesi. E questo è solo l'inizio dell'episodio. Oggi analizziamo quanto raccontato da Ross Coulthard, da TW e da Chad, che descrivono come operano le squadre di recupero, cosa hanno trovato e cosa sarebbe andato storto. Stiamo ancora lavorando all'episodio riassuntivo finale, ma intanto pubblichiamo alcune notizie rilevanti emerse negli ultimi mesi che non avevamo trattato perché concentrati sui riassunti. I contenuti da analizzare sono molti, spesso lunghi e complessi. Un video recente ha raggiunto la durata di 5 ore, quindi anche oggi abbiamo selezionato solo gli elementi più importanti per cercare di ricostruire il quadro in modo chiaro. Ovviamente si tratta di un tema controverso che fino a pochi anni fa sarebbe stato semplicemente impensabile affrontare in questi termini. Oggi però il contesto è cambiato. Conosciamo meglio i protagonisti, sappiamo quanto Ross Coulthard sia considerato un professionista serio e vediamo come questi temi vengano sempre più iscritti nel processo della disclosure. La disclosure, che ci crediate o meno, oggi arriva a toccare persino il tema dei rettiliani. E sinceramente non avremmo mai pensato di pubblicare un episodio come questo. Prima di iniziare è necessaria una precisazione importante sui teschi. Le grandi cavità visibili nei crani non sembrano essere occhi, ma molto più probabilmente fossette termorecettrici, organi sensoriali di alcuni rettili che rilevano il calore a infrarossi emesso dalle prede. Le aperture più piccole potrebbero essere invece narici o parti dell'organo vomero-nasale, detto anche di Jacobson. È un organo che rileva segnali chimici, soprattutto feromoni, aiutando molti animali a percepire prede, partner o rivali. Le vere orbite oculari sono cavità ossee che ospitano e proteggono gli occhi insieme a nervi, muscoli, vasi e tessuti di supporto. In questo caso l'area orbitale sembrerebbe trovarsi più in alto e lateralmente, una disposizione identica a quella dei rettili. I teschi sembrano essere diversi tra di loro, non sappiamo se sono stati manipolati o se c'è dismorfismo sessuale. Evitiamo quindi di antropomorfizzare troppo questi teschi. Molto interessante anche la dentatura, si nota infatti un dente centrale superiore, una caratteristica molto insolita, perché nei rettili la dentatura è normalmente bilateralmente simmetrica. Inoltre non possiamo non citare le statuette della cultura protostorica presumerica di Ubaid, rinvenute soprattutto nella Mesopotamia meridionale, nell'attuale Iraq e datate circa V millennio a.C. Alcune presentano tratti chiaramente non umani, descritti dall'enciclopedia britannica come offidici o vagamente rettiloidi. In questa immagine noi rileviamo una somiglianza davvero sorprendente con i teschi ritrovati in Messico, ma aspettiamo a trarre conclusioni. Notiamo inoltre che in alcuni esemplari compare la raffigurazione dell'allattamento, un dettaglio rilevante perché suggerisce caratteristiche tipiche dei mammiferi più che dei rettili. Allo stesso modo anche le entità mantidi non corrispondono alla morfologia degli insetti propriamente detti, essendo descritte con 2 braccia e 2 gambe anziché con 6 arti. Il Messico sembra foriero di esseri di vario genere, questi rettiliani ma anche le mummie associate Jamie Maussan di cui abbiamo già parlato. Al di là delle possibili truffe e dei reperti forse costruiti per il mercato nero, è interessante sottolineare che sembra che alcune mummie tridattili siano autentiche. Ma la cosa più interessante è che tutti gli scienziati americani che si sono occupati delle mummie tacciono. E anche in questo caso sono stati trovati scheletri di 2,5 metri di altezza da ex militari americani e a parte noi e Coulthard non ne parla nessuno, nemmeno come curiosità.
What's the history of your involvement in these kind of retrieval operations? Is it something that you've done a lot of?
With regards to this particular mission set, no, this was very specialized, but ultimately the call came due to our logistical ability. in our mobilization ability.
And so, as I understand it, we're not revealing at this stage the location in Mexico. That's correct, Chad? You're going to be going to the location in Mexico at some stage. But what we are talking about here is, I mean, it's mind blowing. I can't quite believe it. This is a retrieval of alien reptilian bodies, gigantic, probably 7, 8 foot tall beings, judging from the skeletons. TW, you've actually been right next to these skeletons. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Can you tell me the story of how you came to be involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I was working with another defense company out of Virginia Beach that subsequently started early 22, Aprilish, regarding retrieving some assets under another program. Subsequently, that fast forwarding into August, the number continued to increase, and then of course there was a shift in the situation with regards to China possibly requiring one of these assets that kind of expedited things. Subsequently, we took on the mission set. We went down to Mexico, and we did phase one, which was proof of life, in gauging what we were seeing, if it was true, if it was honest, if it was what we believed it was, or what the mission set believed it was, and subsequently we went and did that.
So, TW, I always love that first moment because I've spoken to a lot of people privately who've been involved in retrievals. There's a lot of great men and women, actually, who've been involved in retrieval operations. There's always that awe moment, that ontological shock. What was it like for you, sir?
It was not much surprises me in this world anymore, but this put me on my heels. It had me question. It had me questioning everything. I trust but verify, and in that situation, of course, I've always been a skeptic, very very realistic. I would say that it's realistic that this does apply or does exist. However, I'd never seen it personally, so I wouldn't comment on that. But until I saw it, and subsequently, what I saw and what we went through on the ground there was an experience I'd never experienced. Absolutely, something was very hard to comprehend.
The implications of that investigation, though, are that there's going to be a high degree of public skepticism that these are constructed objects, that somehow maybe the cartels trying to make money, maybe trying to lure some naive investor to extract millions of dollars, maybe they've created fake skeletons, fake beings. What do you say to that? Is there a possibility that this is an elaborate hoax?
Look, I've been a skeptic most of my life when it comes to this. I would say that I was a skeptic up until August of 22. I am no longer a skeptic. I know what I was engaged with. I know what I saw. I know that wasn't human like. None of the situations were, none of the objects, and really it's trust but verify. The information kind of led you down a different road. I won't name the cartel out directly, but I would say that do I think that there's been a lot of manipulation of information? Yes. Do I think that there's a lot of misinformation? Absolutely. Do I think the world continuously gravitates around the possibilities? Of course. I think it's rational to think that in today's stage and in today's environment, that with all of the encounters that we've had around the world, I'd go from Central South America to include the UK, to include Europe, to include the Middle East. There's too many coincidences right now, and I'm not a firm believer in coincidence.
I mean, what was that moment like when you first describe it to me? Take me through the first moment you saw what you believe are alien remains.
It's interesting. I'll back this up a little bit because I returned home, I want to say 3 to 4 days before my 20-year vow renewal with my wife, which was interesting because I remember my mental capacity at that time was absolutely strained on the ground in Mexico. But subsequently, when the engagement happened, I questioned. I remember this vividly in my head, and just simply saying, "What am I looking at?" Because I couldn't even comprehend it. It was one of these things where I'm a realist at the end of the day, and I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and I didn't believe that this asset could be in this particular location, and why haven't they until now? Why haven't they What am I doing there? All the things, right? It's way above my pay grade. I knew that I had outpunted the coverage, as they say, on this one.
Okay, so we've got an image that we've put up here of what appear to be two skeletal remains. They're clearly not human. If we believe what you've been told about these remains, they date right back to the 1600s.
Correct.
Talk me through what we're looking at here. They appear to be non-human. Talk me through what you're looking at.
I'll move back to the original carving stone. That was one of the first objects that was identified. And that particular stone had a reference of two skeletal looking beings, and one was stabbing the other on this stone. And then that stone was actually date stamped back in the 1632-34 range. Then that leads me to the skeletal remains that were found secondarily. And then you put that, and I go back to this because it was carved in stone. It resembles the artifacts that I found as skeletal remains, and then subsequently, anyway, I was trying to process all of the information as it came together, and subsequently that led me to a place of saying, well, this isn't us, this isn't human, this isn't this didn't even date back. The Mayans were basically carving something at that time, or the indigenous on the ground at that time, basically put something in stone. And there were a bunch of other artifacts like that as well, but this one particularly, as it referenced the skeletal remains versus the object in the stone. It was actually kind of I want to put this. It was mildly concerning. That's probably a good way to put it.
Mildly concerning. When you found the skeletons, TW, were they buried in soil, or were they just lying in a sarcophagus? How were they presented?
They were actually in a cave system underneath that church that Chad referenced. And you can look at the original photo of the unearthing of the entrance into the cave system. You can see where they actually concreted over that original entrance to kind of encapsulate that moment. But inside of the cave system was a natural cavern system. And that's where the artifacts were found, was in the cave system itself.
Now, the thing that fascinates me about all of this is I've been briefed privately by people aware of the legacy program who say one of the things that worries them most about us keeping this secret is that the Chinese particularly are stealing the march on us. They're actually getting ahead of us on this, which is a huge worry. Frankly, if anyone's going to have access to this technology and this knowledge, I want it to be the US. I couldn't think of a more important thing for the United States to be in control of technology and knowledge rather than authoritarian repressive regimes like Russia or China. TW, as I understand it, the background to this is that in the briefing that you were given before you traveled to Mexico, you were told by, I think it's a JPL, Joint Propulsion Laboratories cover organization known as Zero Gravity. You were told in the briefing that the Chinese had got there first and taken remains previously. Can you talk me through that, please, sir?
That was the actuating notification when that came in, that China had actually obtained one of the assets and the technology in Mexico, and then subsequently had taken that back to China, and that's what expedited this particular mission set, that it became a priority. Still to this day, I still question why the United States wasn't directly engaged with this from a governmental perspective versus going into a contractor environment and then stepping down. I mean, to me, that was very odd. And even Neeson even asked me the same question. Where's the United States? And the governmental agents in Mexico were asking, where's the United States? And I said, you have better access to them than I do at this point when it comes to this. Feel free to give them a call and ask them. So, I was just volleying back and forth, but was put in the hot seat directly and put in the hot seat as soon as I hit the ground in Mexico to navigate those conversations.
So, but to be really clear about this, it's quite clear the Chinese knew about this. And I understand from the excellent interview that Chad's done for the Resilient show, as I understand it, there's been a relationship between the Chinese and, incredible as it may sound, these reptilian beings. Historically, this has been going on for some time. I'm going to say something here that I understand the contact with the current Chinese government was first made during the period of Mao Zedong under the communist regime. So they've been allegedly, and I don't know this for sure, allegedly dealing with these reptilian beings since the period of Mao Zedong, of communism. What do you know about that, sir? What were you told in your briefing?
I was told that, I was told that subsequently it was Russia and China that subsequently were of the reptilian end of the house, and if you will, and subsequently they were opposing the Anunnaki, which was supporting the United States in the program, and subsequently looking for peace. And that was the briefing in a synopsis. That was the briefing that was given to me, and then subsequently the matter of national security. And this is where things get interesting, because if it is a matter of national security, I shouldn't have been there. Is the way that I looked at it at that point. But subsequently, they needed to get contained. They needed to contain that situation, and subsequently they needed verification that it existed. I think they questioned whether or not that it was real in some fashion.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, TW, it sounds like a stuff up, a mistake that they didn't deploy. I mean, there are recovery teams linked through the Department of Energy, as you probably know, and they've been involved in many retrievals historically. Why? I mean, I know you've touched on this earlier, but can I put this to you specifically? What's your understanding as to why they didn't use their own recovery teams, and why did they deploy you? No disrespect to you, because you obviously know what you're doing.
Well, I wouldn't. I wouldn't for your latter statement. I wouldn't exactly say I know what I'm doing in this space. Logistically, we can handle that, but understanding what we're dealing with on the ground, I think we were left. We were left relatively blind. I found out subsequently, following the mission set, that 13 operators had died from exposure leading into this. But that told me a lot what I needed to know, which is historic in our position in engaging and dealing with certain governmental aspects. Meaning, we're disposable. If something were to happen to us on the ground, I mean, that's just unfortunate, but that's the way it goes.
But when you say that 13 operators, or you were told that 13 operators have died during these operations, are you talking about this particular operation, or was it a historical thing?
I'm talking about this particular. I was informed that 13 operators died under this mission, under this retrieval mission. Now, I'm not, and they didn't identify the operators of being U.S. or being Mexican or being another sovereignty's governmental operations. But I know, and I would kind of push this back to Chad. I mean, everybody in the ecosystem knows that if 13 operators went down in one mission set, that would be news at 9 type situation, meaning that would not miss the news in any way.
One of the things that TW probably modestly is leaving out here, that when he was down in the cave system and made contact, he actually put hands on the skeletal remains, and he was told that he touched something down there, and his vitals went haywire, and he was given 2 weeks to live because of the sickness that he was told that he had from making contact down there. And thankfully, he's still here with us, but this is where it goes into this follow-up site visit that we're going to do, where I have friends that are still in crash site retrieval teams, and we're going to make sure we make all the proper protocols to make sure myself and our team is safe when we go back and re-excavate the site.
So let me talk you through when you went into this site. I mean, I'm presuming, I know the DOE guys wear biohazard suits, they use breathing gear. What were you wearing? And what warnings had you been given before you went into the site? Were you told that this was potentially dangerous?
No, sir. No, sir.
Were you wearing, I mean, in the images I've seen, you don't appear to be wearing bio-warfare suits.
I was not. No, I was in civilian street clothes. So just blending in with the indigenous. We had no special. We did have some thermal technology with us and some other things, but we had nothing on the spectrum of radioactivity, anything like that, to go into that scenario.
There's a mention there that they noticed that your vitals had changed when you touched these objects. Does that mean that they were monitoring your body vitals? How were they doing that?
Well, it's interesting because no, they weren't monitoring them directly. They were monitoring them indirectly, and I mean by one just for me, but it was tied back to my phone, actually at the time, which was interesting because my heart rate changed, which I would imagine at that point everybody's heart rate would start moving.
Absolutely.
Things didn't move with regards to the skeletal remains. They moved. They referenced the fact that I had touched a portal. And at that point, well, what you said on the beginning of the show or the introduction side, my threshold for pain when it comes to BS is very small. So my rebuttal to that is I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm going to clean my mess up right here, and I'm going to head on back to Texas, and we'll circle back on this.
It's funny you should mention portals, TW, because as a journalist who's been trained to be very, very skeptical, when I first started out investigating this UAP subject, I thought portals, or the notion of a portal, was complete nonsense. I'm fast coming to the realization that the United States knows a lot more about portals and non-human technology than they're letting on. What did they tell you a portal was, sir?
Transporting time and energy through mass along that. But they gave me a second grade introduction to a portal. I had to go subsequently to third parties in my ecosystem to actually get an education on this. It was very mundane. My briefing was very mundane on I guess, the explanation side of reading into the situation. I think that had to do with the timeline of the mission set of when it needed to happen. But subsequently, I really had no debrief when it came down to all the different things. So I didn't have, I still to this day don't have a clear, of course I can search this out, but I don't have a clear definition of what the actual portals have been used for and who actually uses them. But to your point on the U.S. government having the technology and having the access to the technology, I think that's pretty evident for everybody out there in the ecosystem that understands the dynamics of technology and the growth of it.
I ask you, sir, how were you briefed for these operations? How does it work? Are you taken to a skiff somewhere and given a special briefing in Virginia, or is it just done on a secure phone? How are you briefed?
We were done. It was all secure comms back and forth between Texas. I never set foot in the room in Virginia. In fact, I never met the group and the team personally. I talked to them. They were spun in from Egypt. I know there were teammates that were that were stationed in Egypt back and they were tied in through Virginia and then subsequently down to me.
So physically, you arrive at a church location. As I understand it, this whole operation was facilitated by an approach from how do we say this, a very wealthy Mexican businessman. Is that correct?
No, the approach came out of Virginia. This became relationship driven on the ground for connective tissue because ultimately, we got the notification. I think we were 7 days out from when we took on the mission to when we actually landed on the ground. We didn't do anything that we historically do on the front side of a mission set. This was more of just a POL into the house, and subsequently that was the introduction with that team in Mexico that assisted with some political relationships.
One of my friends is a team lead there right now. He has two guys that had made contact with a asset. They're still hospitalized right now a year later.
So these are people who, when you say an asset, you're talking here about a non-human technology of some kind, or perhaps a biological?
Non-human entity or technology that they made physical contact with, even with the protocols in place, and they've been hospitalized for a year now. And so there's a lot of concern. There's friends of mine who care about me, and so I want to make sure that we're safe moving forward in this. So we're, like I said, we're not doing this recklessly. We're going to take extreme precautions and make sure we're doing things correctly. But it's I think back of how TW got brought into this, and sometimes I believe what took place. This is my opinion of learning everything. Talking to TW, I believe what took place was hasty because of the Chinese got a hold of an asset from Mexico, was able to extract that asset before the United States, so it became a race for time. And because it became a race for time, the easiest and most efficient way to do it was to get contractors in, get them in quickly, and try to remove those assets. And a lot of safety protocols were bypassed in order for the sake of time. And sometimes that happens in logistics. Sometimes it happens in the battlefield where you could either do it, cheap, good, or fast. And that's kind of the kind of three things in business. You can do cheap, good, or fast. You can only do two of those things. You can do it cheap and faster, but you can't do it good, or you can do it good and fast, but you can't do it cheap. That kind of criteria goes. And I think what happened was, China already got an asset out, and the U.S. wanted to beat them to getting the rest of the assets out, and TW and his team and other people got sucked into that, and then there was obviously some safety concerns that sounds like it cost some human life. It cost TW his own health for a season, and but thankfully he's okay. But we want to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes moving forward.
TW, what is the background to all of this? How come you can speak about this? You obviously have a security clearance, I presume, and were you under any kind of NDAs or contractual undertakings of not to reveal this operation?
Well, two things on that. One, to correct, I do not have a clearance at the moment. I think that expired 15 years ago now. I mean, it's been a minute. Retired from the space in 16, and then subsequently went back into it in 22. So from 07 to 16, I was active, and then subsequently moved away from that, came home to retire in theory, and then subsequently pulled back into it in 22. But no, and then to answer your second statement there, I guess I would have you reframe that. So I'll answer it in a very direct, very different way.
Yep. I tell you what, can I ask you this way then? Is there anything legally that's stopping you from talking about this operation in Mexico?
No, sir.
Do you think the public should know about the sacrifices that good people have made on the operation that you were involved in?
I think the public should know about a lot of different things, this just being one of them. Unfortunately, I think that we're treated as sheep. Even the previous warriors, the prior service warriors, are treated as sheep, unfortunately, and it's not on a need to know basis. But unfortunately, it affects all of us as human beings, and then operators at that point.
You're an influential businessman. You've got obviously clear MAGA relationships. You know people in the Trump camp, I'm sure. Have you engaged with anybody in the administration about the operation you've been involved in?
No, sir, not directly. I've talked to, how Chad and I met, and subsequently, that particular group, I would say, is probably has the ear of quite a few when it comes to that. So they're all very aware of the situation and were for quite a while. So, but directly to answer your question, no, I have not spoken with the administration. Do I think that they're aware of it? I think they're more aware of what's going on. Maybe not this specific situation, but subsequently the program as a whole.
You're obviously someone who has a relationship with the administration to the extent that you were invited to the inauguration. If you were given the opportunity to speak to President Trump, what would you want to tell him about what you've witnessed?
Well, I guess to be clear, I want to be clear about this. The reason that I was invited to the inauguration, Chad, I'll probably step out and over my skis on this one, but there was a request for me to run for governor of Texas. That's what I was doing at the inauguration. That was the first time I'd ever been to one. But subsequently, that was the purpose of being there, as I understood it. Chad held me accountable for that one. I don't want to step outside the box there, but or I wouldn't have been there, to be clear. It's not my cup of tea, not my forte. I do support the administration. 10th generation Texan. We're born into being a Republican here. I'm just going to lay that out there. You know how it goes in Texas. You're either in cattle or oil, or land. And the historical part of my family has been in all the above. But from that aspect, I support the narrative. I support POTUS, whatever POTUS that is, to include the last few. But no, I would love to sit down and talk with him, actually.
I was going to say, I think President Trump needs to know about this, because the thing that worries me about the covert operation that we're describing here It's not entirely clear to me that presidents have been briefed. I've spoken to people in the administration, and I know there's speculation. I don't think it's necessarily accurate that President Trump is poised to make a disclosure later this year. I actually suspect the president's not being briefed, that he's not being
You're right.
told about the risks that our men and women are being exposed to. Chad, what do you say to that, sir?
You're right. I just interviewed coming up, I think next week on the Rosanian show. I interviewed Congressman Burleson, Congressman Eli Crane. I got a interview coming up with Congressman Burchett, Congressman Luna. All are, these individuals are part of the disclosure of government secrets. They're on a committee to disclose government secrets, and one of the biggest government secrets they're looking to disclose is the UFO UAP information. And one of the things that talking to Burleson that they discovered is that so many things have functioned outside of not only the oversight of the executive branch, outside the president's purview, but also outside of Congress, which is super scary. A lot of these special programs that exist, which is, we thought this was rumor before. We thought it was speculation from people like Dr. Stephen Greer and stuff like that. But it is confirmed now that these programs exist with no oversight of Congress, no oversight of the White House. And so the president of the United States doesn't even have access to know what's going on in some of these programs. And that's essentially you could say these programs are going rogue.
It strikes me that with this covert program that you appear to have found yourself on the periphery of, getting sucked into this retrieval operation, there's a hell of a lot happening that's covert and undisclosed to the American taxpayer and to Congress, isn't there?
Absolutely. A lot more than this.
Yes.
TW, what's your take on that? I mean, do you think that the public's got the right to know? Can you think of any good reason why the public should be withheld knowledge of the fact of a non-human intelligence engaging with the planet?
In today's society, I do, if I'm sitting back there from a strategic intelligence position, because ultimately the mental stability of the American population right now, in my opinion, is relatively weak. And they're easily influenced. So, ultimately there could be a massive shockwave that goes through a fear factor that leads to civil unrest and chaos, just because everybody's gotten a little bit dramatic about things these days. So, but subsequently, we should know, and I think it is the duty of inside the Beltway or the politicians or the leaders to be right now are in place, that they should disseminate that information as to a verifiable fact.
Now, TW, I'm going to ask you, I just want to quickly get one question into you, sir. I'm going to ask you a very specific question about the skull that you saw, the teeth. This is a question that's pertinent to people who I am aware of who have a knowledge of alleged reptilian beings from within the Legacy program. Tell me about the teeth.
Well, it's interesting. This is the second time I've been asking about the teeth. I was asking about it on Saturday night, and I was at an event with my wife. But and the reason I bring that up is the timeline of which I responded to that, Chad. I was kind of in the moment and just kind of kicked it back. But look, we had two particular skulls at that time that had two rows of teeth and different canines too. I want to bring this up too, Chad. We didn't really talk about this, but there were some canine events in there that were extremely abnormal. But then secondarily, you had other skeletons that had one set of teeth that looked very very similar to what you would imagine. They didn't look they have the shark look to it, where you had multiple rows, but two specifically, one individually. So. I didn't know the variance or the impact of that, of what that actually meant. I still don't know to this day.
So just so I'm clear, TW, because this is really important. You're
Sure.
saying there were two rows of teeth in, what was it, the upper or the lower mandible?
Lower.
Really?
Lower.
That is very significant. And I'm sure there are people in the Legacy program right now who are quite surprised that I'm asking that question.
But what I was going to say, what was this is just my speculative opinion of why I think the UFO, the secrecy behind UFOs, UAPs, and extraterrestrial life. I don't think it has anything to do with hiding aliens, hiding things in Area 51. I personally think this has to do with the energy. I mean, when you talk about reverse engineered craft and technology, the idea is out there that we have the technology of 0 point energy. And if 0 point energy is real, which I believe it is real, that's a threat to the petrol industry and all the powers to be who make money in the petrol industry. We're talking, I don't even know the number, thousands of trillions of dollars would the world would become energy independent on a personal scale immediately, right? Everyone would have heat, everyone would have power, everyone would have unlimited supply of energy if 0 point energy was real and accessible to mankind. So I think the secrecy is really behind energy and not so much the secrets of
I,
extraterrestrial
com-
life.
I completely agree with you, Chad. Do you think it's possible, TW, that the Chinese, because they got there first, if there was technology on that site, it was the Chinese that got it first, wasn't it?
Well, not on this particular site. There were 4 crash sites totally, from my understanding. I went to 3 of them. The 4th one I did not engage. That was the Chinese situation. But the other crash sites have not been unearthed. They've not been excavated. They've not been touched. So at this point, it would be plausible. It'd be realistic to think that of course, if China paid for something and if there was a denominational change at some level to some sovereignty to sovereignty, I would think that, of course, that China would want that technology, and if they have one, then they would want them all, in my opinion. I've been told that they have not been. The other sites have not been engaged yet.
So you didn't see any technology when you were in the locations that you were excavating?
No, sir, no technology. And I can only relate this to something in the ecosystem that some folks may be aware of, and that's called the Havana syndrome, and how that works. I've never been mentally foggy. I've never been mentally compressed. I've never understood. I mean, it got as bad to where the confusion was. I didn't know whether I need to go up the escalator or down the escalator. I didn't know it sounds so mundane and just so ridiculous because I look back at that. I complain. I didn't see it at the time. I understood it that something was wrong, but I didn't understand what it was. Got it coming back into Dallas. That was a completely different situation.
So, TW, you were living with the prospect. You were actually told you were going to die because you'd come into contact with this portal. Were you feeling ill?
No, I had been feeling ill for a minute, but again, I mean, to me, it goes back to the false narrative of shock and awe. And look, I am extremely versed on agency tradecraft, and I'm not a fan of it. But unfortunately, and that's the way I interpreted the conversation when it happened. It was more about putting fear into my mind, and they needed to access me, and they needed access to my. They needed me to come in to actually do some additional testing on, of which I just basically said, have a good day. If in the event of, then I guess I'll see you in 2 weeks if you guys show up for the funeral.
And how long did it take for you to get a clearance? I mean, were you preparing your affairs? Did you honestly think that this was real, that you were going to die?
Really back to something lead into the premise of this. I've written my wife and my family a letter. If you're reading this letter, I think most guys in the space understand what I just said. And I sent it to myself. And then subsequently, that was Sunday night. I was leaving Monday morning. I called my son, which was also my partner at the time and still is. But I said, subsequently, if something happens to me, I need mom to check my email. That's all I need. And from there, there's a chain of events that are going to occur. And he said, no, you're going to be fine. And I said, yeah, I don't know anything about this adversary. So, I'm going into something extremely blind. And yes, to your point, I was extremely concerned that you've got all the factions in Mexico as well. I could have easily died from a car accident. I could have easily died from stepping into the wrong in narcos controlled territory. I mean, there's a number of things that could have gone wrong. But
When the new extraction team came in to retrieve the bodies, did they, by any chance, happen to wear protective clothing and masks and all of the gear that you weren't given?
no, sir.
They weren't. They
They
weren't.
were
Do you know who they were? Were they government agencies or were they private contractors?
private contractors. They were flown in after the fact. The actual artifacts stayed in Mexico until they wouldn't retrieve them, and then they took them back to Virginia.
And in the time that you became aware that you were suffering or allegedly suffering exposure to something that the United States government was telling you was going to kill you, not may kill you, but will kill you, in the time that you were living with that realization, were you offered any kind of medical treatment by the US government?
No, sir. No.
Now, TW, there's a good chance, I suspect, that the US government might be watching this and thinking, well, this gives us plausible deniability. This justifies the reason why we used a contractor because he can't prove that it was us that commissioned him. What would you say to that? Would you be in a position if, say, for example, if there was a meeting of the Senate Intelligence Committee and you were called to Congress by good people in Congress who want testimony about this kind of thing, would you be able to provide evidence of your involvement in retrievals?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fact-based information is that's not my concern. It's the concern of it being whether or not that would have been embraced from a leadership perspective, and how much they actually knew about it. To your earlier statement about whether or not POTUS is clearly understanding a few things going on, I know for a fact that it can't be the case. It just simply can't be under certain programs. Um, I know he's not read on everything and all things going on governmentally right now.
So, TW, if push comes to shove, if President Trump rings you, or if, say, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee or the Armed Services Committee ring you and say, sir, will you come to Congress and testify in a skiff and tell the truth and nothing but the truth about what you've told us today? Will you tell them what you've told us?
Absolutely. Probably
And
a little deeper than that.
it's time, isn't it, both of you? It's time the public was told the truth. I personally know many good people are sick of being gaslit. The American public is sick of being gaslit by a government, an intelligence community, and a military that's consistently lied to the public about this for 80 plus years. It's time, TW, isn't it, for the public to know the truth?
It's overdue. That bill's overdue. That bill should have been paid a long time ago. Unfortunately for us, I think our kids. I'm looking at generations in front of me that I don't even know yet. Unfortunately, they are not going to grow up in the same world we did, and that's mildly concerning. And that's probably one of the biggest anxiety points that I have in my world right now is knowing that we have the operational ability. And I'm saying from a community, from a global humanitarian standpoint, to actually enforce change. Politically, we do not.
Can I get a clear statement from you? Is it fair to say, what's your take on this? I mean, from what you're telling me, it sounds to me like you're saying unequivocally, you are now absolutely convinced that that what you saw was a non-human intelligence, an alien body, that the United States is concealing evidence of non-human intelligence. What do you say to that?
I would bet my entire life and career and credibility on it that it's true in fact. And I know it's more so just than this. I mean, there's other instances out there right now. I mean, uh, you couldn't convince me otherwise. How does that sound?